Good morning, all my brothers and sisters. I'm so happy to be here again with you, with all of you, to reflect about gospel, about this light that help us to deal better with our challenges in our lives. So welcome again with our public meeting, and we say thank you for you being here, myself and Victor that is here with me, which is I really appreciate. And before we start our public meetings today, I would like to talk about our Gospel at Home, our invitation to you. If you would like to have, if you want to start Gospel at Home, you are more than welcome to talk with us, to talk with our group Welcoming and Assistance, and we'll be there for you to help you to start this source of light and understanding and into your home, to enlighten everybody that lives there with you, that brings so much peace and so much harmony to your home. So if you want to know more about this, please contact us through the through our welcome our email welcoming@fsscalgary.ca. Thank you very much, and let's start. We're going to start today with this harmonization text from the book Construction of Love, written by Emmanuel and psychographed by Francisco Cândido Xavier. The name of the text is Blinds. The shadow in the physical eyes can be an agonizing ordeal, but the real blindness is that which involves the heart and the mind in the night of rebellion or ignorance. That's why we find in the world blind people of all shades. Blind, crystallized in usury, who see nothing but the poor coined treasure in that deep their eager hands. Blinded in selfish destruction, who see nothing but the capricious ways in which they move. Blind people imprisoned in pride, supposing themselves the only meritorious creatures in the universe. Blind people handcuffed to addiction, in which they turned off the light of their own consciousness. Blind people chained to laziness, who only see their conveniences. Individuals invariably willing to vampirize their fellow men at the expense of complaints and regrets. Blinded by harmful sadness, who despise the grace of the sun and the riches of life, sustained by the spiritual immobility of revolt or despair, forgetting that life is work and renovation. Blind men, entrusted to the vices of unbelief, who observe nothing but the spikes of sarcasm and denial that they victimize them in the depths. For all those blind people who cross our step daily, let us raise our prayers for help praying to the Lord to keep us awake for our own responsibilities with sufficient vision for the performance of our duties, even if this awakening visits us every hour by the divine blessing of difficulty or pain. Let's pray. Master Jesus, we are here again to reflect about your teachings. All together, we ask for your inspiration to help us to uncover our view, to help us to see how much blessings we have daily in our lives and how much blessings we are able to receive from your gospel, from your teachings, that will help us to have a life light as per your words, as per your invitation to follow you. Master Jesus, please give us the light of the understanding, the light of comprehension, the light of faith. So, with your energy of love surround us now, we are thankful, and we start our talks today with your blessing and with the help of our angels, the guardian angels of each of us. So be it. Alright, so let's get started. So today, our invitation is to reflect about this passage of the Gospel. The blind Bartimaeus receives his sight. Can we see the meaning of the Gospel in our lives? So the invitation here is to bring the Gospel into our lives, to apply the Gospel in our daily routine. The Gospel invites us here not to view as a physical view, as we read in this text from Emmanuel, but to have discernment, to have a good understanding, a comprehension about the teachings from the Gospel. Not read the Gospel only through its material point of view, because if we have just a superficial read, we are going to not understand all the symbols behind the word. We are not going to understand the spirit of the letter. And that's the invitation here. Saulo Cesar, this is one of the sources that I researched in order to do this talk. He tells us that why it's important for us to know that Jesus cured a blind man, if you're not blind, or at least most of us are not. Because this teaching is not restricted to the material part of our lives. This teaching is much more important for us to see how that is applied to our spiritual life, to how we are seeing the life. Jesus, when he saw a person with disabilities, he also saw the need of that souls. Some way that are blind people who cannot see the sunlight, but there are more people, more blind people who cannot see the higher dimensions of life. And that's the invitation here. So I just would like to give you the references that I researched for this talk today. So the first one is with Saulo César from the Federation, the Spiritist Federation, Brazilian Federation. It's Saulo César, Meeting with Pain, the Blind. Arthur Valadares, from Brazil too, The Blind of Jericho. Simon Pedro, also Brazilian, The Gospel and the Evolution. Haroldo Dutra, Not Every Blind Man Wants to See. Gospel According to Spiritism, The Gospel of Jesus Christ, and the quotes from Emmanuel by Francisco X. Javier. And then I would like to invite all of you to reflect a little bit before we start. And I would like to bring this text from Ezekiel, from the Old Testament. They have eyes to see, but they do not see, and ears to hear, but they do not hear, for they are a rebellious nation. Let's reflect a little bit about this text from Ezekiel and about these questions as well. How are we seeing the invitations from life? Those invitations can be sometimes very tough, very challenging. How we are seeing them, with revolt or with meekness. How are we hearing the invitations from our consciousness? How we are hearing our alert voices? Are we paying attention on them? Do we really want to see the truth that sets us free? Because that's what Jesus said. Then we'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Do we know what is the truth? Am I able to see beyond this material life? Can I see there is a future life? That Jesus' kingdom does not belong to this planet, to this life? That's what he said. That's his answer to Pilatus. My kingdom is not from this world. Am I able to see beyond this material world? Am I allowing the blindness of ignorance and revolt cover my sight? Am I trying to find the lessons behind the circumstances that I am facing? So the invitation here from this passage about this blind man from Jericho, Bartimaeus, is to see ourselves with the eyes of the soul within this therapeutic encounter of Jesus with this blind man from Jericho. Arthur Valadares would say that all the meetings that Jesus had with some people with the people from his time, the sick woman, for instance, that touched his clothes and she was cured from the bleeding. The Nicodemus, where Jesus taught him about who is our neighbor. The encounter with Zacchaeus that helped Zacchaeus to to focus on the spiritual values of life, not on the material ones. Those encounters, they bring symbols of values, states of spirits, and which frequency we are tuned to. And this encounter with the blind man is not different. When we look deeper, when we remove the spirit from the letter that gives us life, we can bring these teachings to our lives. When we can bring meaning. What's the meaning of this text, this part of the gospel to my life? And that's the invitation here again. So this passage that we're going to see now was written by the 4 gospel writers: Mark, Luke, Matthew, and John. But we are going to bring here the text from Mark that brings more symbols for us to analyze. So let's start. Then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many rebuked him. Rebuked here means reprehension. And told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. Cloak here means cape. What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go," said Jesus, "your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. So this is one of the passages that has more symbols that we think about, that I have reflect on before. I have been bring lots of parables that because it's parables that it's supposed to have lots of symbols, but this one, it's a passage. And if we just look at superficially, we are going to think that this is just a simple characteristic of a time, of a person, of a people, and of a cure that Jesus had made so many. But accordingly with the searches that I have researched, all the stalkers that I have described here, they help me to understand what the symbols of this parable, of this passage, and that symbols, that when I could understand all this, the meaning behind the letters, that bring me so much meaningful to my life. So then, since I have been researching this passage, since I have been studying it, I became to be more aware in my daily routine. In each sense, am I have been blind? And which part of the Bartimaeus life I am before Jesus or after Jesus. But again, Jesus is the greatest educator of the souls. He is able to talk about a farmer, a sower, a fisherman, a shepherd, and that's how he brings meaning to his teachings. Because the people from that time, that's how they were able to understand the teachings. And he always searched for the right moment so his message could be full of symbols, so that would make sense to those who lived in that time, and also to us. Because now we are more evolved and we are able to really understand, to have a better understanding of his words that are words of eternal life. So in Simon Pedro lecture, he told us that Jesus used this method of teachings called constructivist. So that was curious for me, so I did some research upon it. And constructivist teaching is based on the belief that learning occurs as learners are actively involved in a process of meaning and knowledge construction, as opposed to passively receiving information. So if my profession, my daily routine is fishing, so Jesus would use some knowledge about fishing to teach me how to apply some concepts in my life, some moral concepts in my life, based on my knowledge about the things that I used to do during my life. So that was a great method that Jesus used to have, and it's so great that we could teach people like in the same way, so they could understand better. When he was talking with accountants, he used to make connection with accountants. When he was talking with the ladies that work at home, he used to apply the knowledge about cooking to his moral teachings. So it's full of analogies and full of new concepts to connect the knowledge that we have already with his teachings. And this is what we need to know very well about how to understand the gospel. And in this text per se, we need to understand some concepts from that time, from historical facts. And then we are going to analyze each line of this text to really understand the meaning behind some words here. So let's start by the historical facts and spiritual analogy from Jericho, first of all. So Jericho was a city. Actually, there are lots of very interesting points about Jericho. Jericho is the lowest city in the world and is the oldest city in the world. So, and by Jesus' time, the city was very well known by its commerce. Was a very rich city and was where the currency exchange was done, where the city that was associated in the scriptures to the materialistic matters, to the materialistic issues. And because it was the lower city in the world, and it was lowest than Jerusalem by that time, was associated with the things that are lowest, not the spiritual concept, but the inferior concepts, the things that are mostly in our horizontal level of our lives. So Jericho's name means perfume, fragrant, symbol of materialism. Fragrance that can involve us in the fragrances of the road, the material matters of the road. And because it was located, because it is located 400 meters below Jerusalem, as known as City of Peace, Jerusalem had that connection with the spiritual level of life, connected with the spiritual ascension. So we can see that in the parable of Samaritan, where Jesus says that a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was assaulted. And everybody that didn't stop to help him was coming from the same direction. They were coming from Jerusalem to Jericho. But the Good Samaritan was doing all the way back, was going from Jericho to Jerusalem. So he stopped and he helped the man. So there are lots of conceptions in scriptures about Jericho. Where in Jericho that Jesus inspired a local chief tax collector named Zacchaeus, showed him the spiritual values, that the material values are important for us, of course, because we are here incarnated, but most important in the reason that we are here is to accomplish with our goals, which is to build the kingdom of God inside us. So this is the very important point here, because Jericho had this association with the lowest part of life, the material life, the lowest, the horizontal level of our lives. And we are invited to connect it with our vertical level of our lives. When somebody, every time that in the scriptures we see somebody going from Jerusalem to Jericho, means that was falling down from spiritual values to the material values. So this is a very important thing to know about the location. So every time that we are just thinking about our horizontal level, we are invited to go up, to focus on the spiritual level. And the name of Bartimaeus. So Bartimaeus, as is written in the text, means son of Timaeus. So here Bartimaeus has a very important meaning. Bartimaeus represents all humankind. He didn't have a name. By that time, everybody was known by their parent, their father's name. For instance, James and John, sons of Zebedee. Simon and Andrew, sons of Jonas. Jesus, son of Joseph. But Bartimaeus didn't have a name. He was just Bar, that means son in Hebraic, and Timaeus. He didn't have a personality. He was somebody. He was not a person, like a name. So in that conscience makes him how badly he could feel, because even a name he didn't have. And in this context represents the humankind. Everybody. It's represented by Bartimaeus in this text. And also our blindness about the spiritual level, about the spiritual matters. So let's analyze the first part of the text. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." We are going to analyze those words that are bound here, that are emphasized, and then we are going to try to bring this, the understanding of the symbols to our lives, to our moment here. So it's important to understanding this part of the text that the gospel writer here was very, very wise to put on. Jesus was leaving the city. So was in this transition from Jericho to Jerusalem. And in this transition was also Bartimaeus, because he was on the roadside, on the border, because that's where Jesus met him. So that's what we need to ask to ourselves. We should ask ourselves, am I leaving my Jericho, going to Jerusalem, or I am still in Jerusalem, inside the city? In Jericho, inside the city. Am I focused on the materialism, on the material matters of my life only, or am I trying to see the meaning of my life? Why I am here? What I am supposed to learn? Where I came from and where I'm going to? Where I am here? Have I ever asked these questions to myself? So, if we think a little bit more, reflect a little bit, we are going to see that Jericho is everything that is temporary in life. Our profession, our personality, our name, our material things, car, house, everything. All those are things that are temporary, because you're going to stay here. Where I'm going to when I die. What I'm supposed to take with me. So Arthur, he advises for us to be aware about our attachment to Jericho. To see everything that I have here, my profession or everything that I do, everything is connected with the temporary point, this temporary life that I have here. They are important to us to make our living, but they are not more important than the construction of the virtues inside of me, to be connected with God. While I am here, I am invited to reflect on this. So that's the way that we can see the localization, how important is where this place is. What is important here to talk about Jericho and about Jesus leaving Jericho. And Bartimaeus was sitting, the blind man, because he's blind for the spiritual context of our lives, was sitting and begging. So Bartimaeus was sitting because maybe he didn't have a pathway to follow, because he was sitting on the exit road, but he was not on the road, he was on the roadside And he was sitting as he was in this symbol of accommodation, symbol of spiritual stagnation. That's what we should think about this part of the passage. Are we stagnated in this part of our understanding of the gospel, that we are just seeing the meaning, the material part of the gospel? I'm trying to see what's the message behind. I'm trying to understand how can I apply this to my life, or to see myself in the characters of the gospel, because those are common people like us, with struggles in life, with problems, with deficiencies, that we are all invited to see ourselves on it. If it's not applied to our physical body, it's applied to our spiritual body. So we can think too that maybe he was trying to find a way, but he didn't know which way to follow. So when he saw Jesus, actually he didn't see because he was blind, but he was able to hear. He used his other sense. He was aware. He was searching for something. So some questions that we should ask to ourselves, that maybe we are in the same stage as Bartimaeus. We are sitting, just waiting, or we are trying to learn, we are trying to seek for the meanings that we need to our lives. He was on the exit roadside. We are in the exit roadside, or we are on the roadside. And the roadside here means the edge of the divine laws. He was not accomplished. He was not doing the efforts. He was not making efforts to comply with the divine laws. He was on the roadside of the divine laws. We can access the divine laws how? Through working in the good, through loving each other, just serving as Jesus served us. That's the invitation that Jesus left here for us. To see how we can apply to the divine laws in our conscience, question 621. Because that's how we can follow Jesus. That's the only way that we are going to be happy. Question 614 of the Spirit's book about natural laws. And on the edge of the road means outside of the straight pathway that leads us towards God. Question 115. And what's the shorter distance between us, between point A to point B? It's a straight point. It's a straight line. If I start doing some curves, I'm going to take longer to get there. So why not comply with the divine laws and follow the straight point, the straight line towards God? That's the most easy way. Easy, but not so easy, because we know how difficult it is to develop virtues in ourselves and how long this takes. It's not something that we are going to be able to develop from overnight. We need to make efforts every day, every time, to be able to develop those virtues in ourselves. Like Saul examples. On the gates of Damascus, who thought that he could see before, but he was blind to the truth of the gospel. And he became blind for a short period after meeting Jesus. Maybe that blindness was very useful for him to realize how pride he was, how pride was covering his vision. How about the part of begging? Begging for things that do not bring existential joy and peace to our lives. So Bartimaeus was there, sitting and begging. Stagnated, spiritual stagnation and begging. Begging and chasing things that are basically materials, that don't bring joy, existential joy to our lives, don't bring us satisfaction. We still feel emptiness inside. We are always looking for pleasures and satisfaction and happiness that comes from outside, comes from others, when we have so much inside of ourselves. We became beggars of life, asking for being satisfied, maybe with the foods for pigs that we can see in the parable of the two sons, far from the house of our Father, where there is so much abundance. In the words of Jesus, I have come so that they may have life and life in abundance. Regardless of our material struggles, our problems that everybody here has, because we are in a planet of expiation and trials, and we are all facing the same problems. But regardless of this, if we have this knowledge, have this connection with our spiritual level, matters, and if we have this connection and the focus on our future life, we are going to be happy here, right now. We are going to feel joy, we are going to feel full of contentment and be grateful. We're not going to be beggars. We're going to be donators. We're going to give to others what we have inside of us. And then Bartimaeus began to shout. He began to show his pain through complainings. How many times we do that? How many times, instead of seeing the lessons behind the circumstances that we are facing in life, we just see the complaints, we just see the problems. Emmanuel says in our daily bread, in the in the text about let us give thanks, he says, it's our inner blindness that causes us to trip over obstacles, wherein only divine favors dwells. Sometimes we ask for things that we're going to give me so much pain in the future. Sometimes we don't see what we have already. Like Bartimaeus, he couldn't see, but he was able to hear. So he used what he had. So maybe we are invited here to use the knowledge that we have already. Maybe it's not enough, but we are here to try to learn more and more. We have all the gospel here to us to reflect upon. We have all these books from Allan Kardec for the doctrine, the Spiritism, bring us so much light, so much precious knowledge that help us to humble our heart, to have faith in better days. So in the parable of the bags of gold, or the talent, that we most know by most of us as the the parábola dos talentos, sometimes we don't use what we have, because God always gives us everything that we need to succeed. God never gives us nothing that is heavier than we can carry. So let's be thankful. Let's say thank to God, even though there are difficulties, even though there are pain, but we are here to learn. We are here to take it out, the lessons, through whatever we are going through. And Jesus also said to us, seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Things that we need, not sometimes what we wish. Because that's something that we wish sometimes not good for us. And God knows what is the best for us. And sometimes we complain because we keep asking and God keep giving us what we need to have in order to achieve what we want, and we don't understand. In Haroldo Dutra's lecture, he says that not everybody wants to see. So sometimes we ask for patience, and God gives us opportunities to exercise patience, and we complain, oh my gosh, there's so much. But that's how we learned. That's how we are able to accomplish that virtue. It's towards exercise. So this other part that's very important too. Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. So what we can think about this many rebuked, or about this crowd around Jesus? Let's try to think. When we are facing a problem and we are struggling to solve this problem, to overcome this challenge, and seems that it's getting bigger and bigger. It's getting more and more problems piling on that one that we had. What that means? That means this crowd, that sometimes we think that we are alone, that things are getting very, very heavy. The burden is very heavy. And what we are invited to do, to make more efforts. Like on the lectures that Luis, our friend, has been giving to us, the power of will. He brought to us the question 911, where Kardec asks to the spirits, the superior spirits, if the will would be powerless to overcome the passions that we have. And the spirits, the benevolent spirits, says no. Many people say I want to, but their will is on their lips. So we need to make more efforts, more disciplined, perseverance, continuous efforts to overcome the deficiencies that we still have, the blindness that doesn't allow us to see what the lesson, what we need to, how we need to get better, how we get better, how we need to learn that lesson. And that's what happens many times. We also think that the more we want to seek Jesus, for instance, in working for good, and working as a volunteer here, sometimes we have been talking, sometimes we have some problems, people say, oh, you are working too much, you are doing so much. But we know that self-transformation requires patience and requires work. Sometimes we think that it's only external crowd that prevent us to seek for Jesus, but sometimes it's internal too. Sometimes we have an internal crowd, our pride, our selfishness, that doesn't allow us to go to make efforts to develop the virtues that we need to develop in order to become better. We can see that happening with Zacchaeus, that had to climb the tree to see Jesus. There was a crowd between him and Jesus. We could see that with the sick woman, that had to, was a lot of people around Jesus. She couldn't talk to him. She just touched his clothes. There was the same that happens with the paralyzed man that was lowered through the roof to see Jesus, to be cured by Jesus. So between us and Jesus, there are a huge crowd. Sometimes internal, sometimes it's a crowd that we have inside of us that are not allowing us to go to Jesus. Let's think about that. And this was a very nice call that Arthur gave to us in his lecture about the cego of Jericho, or the blind of Jericho. And the Bartimaeus was shouting. He kept shouting, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And then Jesus stopped and said, called him. What does it mean? Jesus stopped and he did not go to him. He said, call him. He asked the crowd to call him. Maybe we should think that maybe those are the voices of our conscience asking us, calling us. And Jesus has been calling us for so long through our alert voices in our conscience. But sometimes we don't want to hear them. We just don't want to. We are not paying attention. And Jesus always stops to call us, always. And he always there for us. So they called the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, he is calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. So just another point that is very important to know here about the cloak. So by that time, the beggars, they had to use this cloak, this cape. So it's a symbol, or it's some sign for the authorities that they are allowed to beg. So and they used to put all the money that they collect from the begging inside of this cape. So, what that means? This means that it's related to the material part of our lives as well. The cape of how we show us externally to the society, and also the material part of our lives. The money and the appearances that we have. So what he did, he just threw his cloak. So he showed to Jesus how he was. How are we? This is part of our self-welcoming. Accept us the way we are, because Jesus accepts us the way we are. Jesus knows us. Jesus knows all his sheep by the name. So he knows us. So why we are using capes or masks to disguise the imperfections that we bring. So we are here invited to see us the way we are. We only be able to self-transform if we make efforts, if we really want to see us the way we are. Not the way that we want to be, but the way we are now, apprentices of life, but to immortal spirits and God's children. In one of the texts from Emmanuel, in The Way, the Truth, and the Life, Emmanuel says, the maintenance of false appearances before Christ or his messengers, which means our guardian angels or mentors, complicates the situation of those who needs. So, here's the invitation to use the acceptance to ourselves. We still have so much darkness inside us, but we are capable to make light, to see, to transform our imperfections to virtues. In those imperfections, Jesus knows, and these will not prevent us to walk towards Jesus. And that's what Bartimaeus did. And so Jesus asked him, very important question, what do you want me to do for you? Jesus asked him. Haroldo says in his lecture something very important, because when he was starting his studies with the gospel, he read this and he was, why Jesus asked to the blind man what he wanted to do? Because of course the man would say, I want to see, because he was blind. But as he says in his lecture, not everyone wants to know, wants to really see. Maybe there are lots of other beggars there, but only Bartimaeus was able to shout, was able to know exactly what he wanted to do. Because when the crowd came to him and called and said, cheer up, he's calling you, he jumped. He threw out his cape, so he was ready to see. And what is important here too is for us is to know what we want that Jesus does for us. And maybe we should actually change this and ask Jesus, like Saul, like Paul, what do you want me to do? And Jesus teaches here that sometimes it's more important than asking and raising is to know what we want. Those who don't want to know what they are looking for don't know what to do when they have find it, like Simon Pedro says, or like in the Alice in the Wonderland, when the cat asked to Alice, if you don't know where you're going to, any road will take you there. So it's important for us to know, what do you want? What is important for me? Jesus will be there to help us, but we really need to know what we are looking for. And the blind man said, Rabbi, I want to see. So Bartimaeus knew what he wanted. He could answer the question very quickly. But most of us, and I can include in that, most of us we would ask something to do related to Martha stuff. Martha and Mary, where Martha was busy with lots of stuff and Mary was just sitting and listening to Jesus. So what we really want to our lives, what we really would answer to Jesus if he came and asked us, what do you want me to do for you? Let's reflect upon this very important conscious ask. And then Jesus said, go, your faith has healed you. Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. So he was cured and he followed Jesus. Jesus says that to everyone that he cured, because it says that to everyone that he cured, your faith has healed you. So it's our faith in God, in ourselves, in life, that help us to overcome many, many problems in life, to give us strength to overcome, to keep going, to keep walking, not be sitting and waiting, but walking towards Jesus. I'm going to be a little bit late here. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm trying to explain a little bit better and faster here. So, followed Jesus along the road means that when we are awake for the real meaning of life, for the vertical level, aligned with the divine laws. So, Bartimaeus started following Jesus along the road. He was not more on the roadside, he was on the road following Jesus. And as the question 625 of the Spirit's book says, what is the most perfect type that God has offered to human beings as their guide and model? Look at Jesus. So here it's good to remind another advice from Emmanuel. The shadow in the physical eyes can be an agonizing ordeal, but the real blindness is that which involves the heart and the mind and the night of rebellion or ignorance. Which kind of blindness we are facing right now? The ignorance one? The rebellion one? And Jesus led by John, Jesus advises, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So by that time, Bartimaeus was able to have the light in his life, because he was following Jesus. So this passage starts with a blind man that was sitting on the edge of the road begging in Jericho. Then we see him returning to the divine laws, to the harmony of life, returning to raise and to act upon his own evolution, to see, to be able to see, to really see all his potentiality as an immortal spirit. And this is what we are invited to do, to see ourselves like apprentices of life, but able to reach all the virtues that we are invited to build in ourselves, in our lives, to see the meaning of the truth of the divine laws in our lives, and to be loyal to them for the sake of our happiness. We will be always walking within the light of life that Jesus promised here. In this passage, finalize with a man that receives the sight and was able to walk with Jesus towards Jerusalem. And it's filled of light. And the walking that guarantees the maintenance of this light in our lives is the walking. It's not the sitting, but it's to making an effort to keep walking. Many times we act as blind people from Jericho. We don't want to notice the invitation from Jesus, the invitation from our own conscience. This talk is one of them. This talk that we are here explaining and talking about, this text that we are talking about here, is one of these lights. It's not by chance. So why we are hearing this? Why this is important for us? This is an opportunity. This is Jesus passing by us and extending his hand and inviting us once more to the abundance, to the light of his teachings. So thank you very much. Anybody has any comments or questions?
Just good morning from Anna, Carol, and Anna.
Oh, nice. Good morning, guys. So good to have you here. So, if anybody has anything, any comments, okay. Thank you very much, and let's do our final prayer. Once more, let's close our eyes and let's raise our thoughts and heart towards our Master Jesus. Let's say thank you, Master, for the lights that you sent to us today. The light that allow us to see beyond this life, beyond these matters, to see what's the reason that we are here, the reason that we should work in ourselves to develop the virtues in our lives. And how good is when we feel that we are somehow developing a little bit of the virtues that we are invited in our daily routine. How good, how much light and happiness we have inside us. Master, as a servant of yours, we ask you to always be with us. Always, please, send your emissaries, your mentors that help us to make efforts to be closer and closer to God. Thank you, all the messengers of God, all benevolent spirits that are here with us, for the inspiration, for the help that you provided to us today, and with this light that we are feeling here today, be with all of you that are here with us, all your family, and with all those that are not here, that couldn't be here with us today. God bless you. Have a blessing Sunday and lots of lights to your lives. So be it.